I asked my client, how are things going as we opened up our coaching session together? We've been meeting every week for a few months. Amazing dude. He is a high achiever. He's a husband. He's a father, working this 9 to 5 job, but also working on these different side projects to pursue other interests. And so he answered me based on the job that he was at during our meeting. Like he was under the, that the fake lighting and the stale background of the meeting room that he was using. He looks at me and he says, "Oh, this place, it's like death by 1,000 cuts." And he said it kind of like with a laugh, like as if like he was, like joking but not joking. But then he continued on and he says, "This place is slowly killing my soul." And as a guide, I don't take any of these things lightly. When you're using such descriptive language like this, I grab onto it because it's telling me something about an internal state. And when I asked him about it, he started to kind of like just brush it off. He's like, "Oh yeah, but everything is fine. It's not that bad." And that's when I had to get him to pause for a second. I was like, "Dude, do you realize within the first 3 minutes of this conversation that you went from saying this place is killing my soul, it's death by 1,000 cuts, and then literally almost the same breath you're saying, oh, everything is fine, it's not that bad." I'm like, "What do you mean it's not that bad?" And in that moment of reflecting back at him, what he had just said in his own words, I could see the light bulb turn on for him, starting to realize, holy smokes, like this stuff is like invisible to me. Did I really just say that? And I think we can be oblivious to our own language, our own way of being. And when there's a moment here when someone reflects it back at you, it can just shake things up. It can get you to a place where you finally can wake up. And so this, my friend, is a very subtle but clear sign of the war within. And it's important for us to have this conversation because you can feel the bleeding and you can maybe sometimes point at it, but then within moments just lie to yourself about it. Just completely cover it up and not even realize you just did that. And so this is the conversation that I want to have with you today, is to start thinking, what if the burnout that I'm experiencing, what if the snap, like the moments where I'm snapping at my wife or my children or my coworkers, what if this restlessness that I feel inside is not just stress? What if this is a war that's happening inside of myself? So I invite you to stick around because in this video, I want to really help you name what is going on inside you and help you realize that trying to fix all these things outside of yourself or trying to seek things from outside of yourself isn't going to change anything about what's happening internally until you start to face what's happening internally. But before we get into it, my name is Oliver Manalesa. I've spent the last 13 years guiding high achievers, helping them end the war within so that they can live from a place of more peace, more presence, and more purpose. Look, I have seen this war inside of myself and inside of my clients. And we can look like we have it all together outside, like we're the go-to person with all of the answers that everyone can lean on. But internally, we're just barely hanging on and we're unraveling. And so that's why I feel like this is such an important series for me to be creating for you. So as we get into it, I think it's important that we start to acknowledge the war within, first maybe by defining what it is. So from my experience and from my observations, it's an internal conflict that's happening between who you really are and who you're pretending to be on the outside. You know, we can have these different traits that really serve us, like self-editing. Obviously, when you are communicating, when you are speaking, when you are writing, when you are presenting, it's so important to be very mindful with your words, that you are cautious, that you are careful, that you are precise. And all of that contributes to the delivery of the message or the delivery of your expression. But taken to its furthest extreme, it can turn into a form of self-erasing, where you start to cover up who you really are, where the truth of who you are, you prevent people from actually seeing it. Maybe because there's a level of ugliness or shame inside of us that we just don't want people to see, or that we have these negative stories or judgments about ourselves, and we want to make sure that other people don't see it. So we overcompensate by presenting ourselves in a particular way of being positive and charismatic and knowing all the answers. It's like these greatest traits that we have turning toxic, because this speed that we have of execution, it can lead to recklessness, just creating messes, where having high standards for yourself, like being very aspirational in that sense, can turn into a form of perfectionism that paralyzes you, that just stunts your growth and your ability to make an impact with your gifts. Also, this war within is a form of betrayal of our boundaries, of our values, our desires, and most importantly, our soul. Just abandoning these deeper aspects of ourselves. There's this gap when it comes to the war within between your mind's attachment to control, to controlling the outcome, to your heart's cry for purpose, for meaning, for being of service, for seeking God. It's also this performance of peace, of appearing like you have it all together while suppressing the pain that's happening inside of yourself, acting like you're okay and everything's okay when really deep inside you're not. And I think, going back to the earlier example of my client who says his job, his situation is death by 1,000 cuts, it's killing his soul, but then instantly minimizing it. Oh, it's not that bad. I think it's great to have perspective and look at how there are other people in much worse conditions with much worse problems to help us appreciate, what we do have. So I think there's room for perspective. But when we instantly diminish our internal reality, when we so very quickly minimize it and just act like it's nothing, like it's not that bad, like my client said, I think we start to ignore something that's starting to maybe first whisper, and then eventually, if you ignore that, it's going to turn into a scream for attention. This war within has the tendency to hide. That pain that we're experiencing, it's so real. But lying to ourselves about it, it just helps that war within continue to survive, to fester and grow within us. And this is where high achievers, even myself and the clients that I work with, we become performers. It's just this act. Everything is fine on the outside, but behind the mask, dying inside. Like in my own experience, I remember in my first business, it was something so creative and so I was so curious and I was so passionate about creating my first business, which was in real estate. And eventually I started to lose touch with that, and it became so much more about money. And I started to wonder, I'm like, why do I feel like something is missing? So I tried to read more books and go to more seminars and try to reinvigorate this spark that I originally had. And nothing would ever last. And then I would start to try to be more productive, or use more tools, or use more hacks to try to outrun or outpace the emptiness that was happening inside of me. And it wasn't until I finally acknowledged that there was a deeper misalignment, it was only then that I was able to finally transform the situation. It was, I quit looking outside of myself and I looked inside of myself, and I started to realize, what was really going on. And so we can maybe start this conversation about the war within by pointing out, what are some of the symptoms? What are some of the stages of this war within? And like I said earlier, maybe it's the self-editing and taking to its furthest extreme, self-erasing. Or it's these high standards that you have for yourself, but when you take it to its furthest extreme, you're just constantly feeding this sense of not ever being enough. It might even be numbing with pornography, with scrolling, with television, with overworking, with food. Because all of these things, we know what kind of shift, what kind of chemical, emotional shift it can do for us. We utilize these things as a way of self-medicating to numb what's actually happening inside of ourselves. And so I think it's so important that we acknowledge that it's just a mask. Then there's also rage. So I have seen many, many times where these random outbursts, just snapping with rage, whether it's in the car, just so out of character, or at the TV screen, at something that just incited so much anger inside of you that you yell like venomously, not even realizing it was coming out of you. Or maybe, or worse, maybe you break a physical object. And I totally get it. I've had moments where I've screamed in my car with so much venom, and I didn't even know where it came from. And it quickly made me feel so much embarrassment and so much shame about myself. So I knew that there was something happening inside, and I didn't want other people to see it, so I would hide it. And I would try to contain it and try to compartmentalize it. So I would know how to appear calm and positive on the outside because I have a history of it. I could impersonate it. I know how to look a particular way, look good and look calm, look relaxed, when really inside there's so much dissonance. And then it creates this distance, this emotional unavailability with the people around me, with the people that I love. This war within can express itself, can manifest itself in these moments where you feel like a fraud, where you feel like you're just putting on an act in your own life, and you're not, and there isn't this sense of just being real, being the authentic you. So as I share some of these symptoms and some of these stages, can you see yourself in it? Can you see where times in your life, or maybe in your life right now, where these are rising up to the surface, where these signs and symptoms are actually right there? And if you're anything like me and the amazing people, these are not broken people. These are high achievers. These are productive, functioning people. But they go through this war within just like you and I do. And when this uncomfortable, lower level emotion, these dense emotions and sensations come up, they're so unpleasant. What's the first thing that we do? Well, we're doers, right? We're action oriented. We make things happen. So very quickly, what I know to be true is that we start fixing the outside. We look outside of ourselves because it's more tangible. We can put our hands around it, and we know, there's a sense that we can change it because it's outside of ourselves. So it might look like changing our offers or shrinking our business. How many times have I seen I'm so burnt out because my business is so busy. Maybe if I shrink my business, it'll actually shrink my suffering. So is that really going to work? It might be, what's my habit stack? I need better habits. This is, maybe that'll make me feel better. Or something outside of myself like books. Let me learn more. Let me gain more tools. Let me meditate more, And of course there's value in all of these elements, but if you are only looking at the external, you're only looking at the fruit, you're never getting to the root of the issue. Because you can try to fix all of these things outside of yourself, but in the end still not feel peace inside. And that's ultimately what this becomes about. We're trying to change our business, reinvent our brands, change our offers, quit our job. We're trying to change all these habits, Let's do more. Let's add more to our plate. We're trying to learn more. Maybe there's something outside of there's something I don't have that someone else has, and maybe if I have it, then it'll change an internal state. It'll help me feel less of that pain. It'll help me feel more peace. And so we're chasing peace. We're trying to get to a destination of fulfillment, of meaning, when really the invitation is to stop avoiding the truth inside of yourself. That you have to actually do the uncomfortable work of looking at yourself, acknowledging that there's a war inside. Because that peace, that meaning, fulfillment, satisfaction that you are after isn't something that you chase. It's something that emerges once that war within has ended. And again, maybe, I don't want to put some, false ideas that you can just end the war within, like it's just a one and done. I think this is a daily, moment to moment challenge that we're faced with as human beings. That you cannot, I don't think you could ever, sever our human nature, where there's always going to be these battles, and there's going to be moments where these are more expressed than others, or more manifested than other times. But at the very least, by naming it today, by acknowledging the symptoms, by turning our attention more inwards instead of outside of ourselves, we can begin a process of learning to create more peace inside of ourselves. To know when the war, that there's a war happening inside, and that we can diffuse it, that we can de-escalate it. And maybe some things for you to reflect on is, where are you pretending everything is fine? Where do you feel like you've been hiding what's really going on inside? What part of yourself have you been ignoring or suppressing? Where are you performing peace while suppressing pain? So, my friend, I'm so grateful that you are here with me in this conversation. This is part of a series that I am very excited to create, because I know there's so much healing that is needed in our hearts and in our souls. And so this series, Ending the War Within, it's all about this topic and expanding on this topic, and giving us the language, giving us the insights, giving us the clarity, so that we can actually start moving the needle more towards that peace within, as opposed to the war within. And so if this hits home, I invite you to please look out for my next video. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe so that you can stay up to date with the upcoming videos in this series. And if you feel like you'd like more support, you want to dive deeper, I think it would be really great if you checked out my book. It is called The Daily Prosperity Method, and it's available as a digital book and an audio book, which I read myself, and you can access it with the link below. But if you want more in-depth, more of a sacred space for yourself to confront the truth that's happening inside, I'd be honored to be with you in a guidance call. Please use the link below to book a guidance session with me, and I look forward to being of service and supporting you in your journey. My friend, thank you so much for joining with me. This war within, it ends the moment that you start to choose truth. When you start to look inside of yourself and look in the mirror, as opposed to being distracted and lost with all of these things outside of yourself. I'm excited to join you in the next video. Thank you for being with me. God bless.